Okay, let's take it away. Jeanette, do you want?
He's joining, having some problem with this team. So yes, please proceed. He'll join momentarily.
Okay, thanks, Sheila.
All right, so I'll do the roll call. Anne Marie?
Here.
Craig?
Here.
Steve Foley?
Steve is here.
And last but not least, Asia.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's get started. Do you have a flag for the Pledge of Allegiance? Is that how we do that?
Yes, ma'am. Just a moment,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, we can
pledge
see it.
allegiance to the flag
To the flag.
of the United States of America
America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so call to the audience. I don't think we have an audience, but I have to make that call, right?
Yep.
Okay, so hearing none, move on to the safety share. Does anyone have a safety share, something that they would like to share? Heat related, maybe?
Sure, why not? It's hot. Drink plenty of fluids.
Perfect.
Good point. Very on point. Anyone else have anything to share for their safety share? Okay, then I would encourage, I think Steve is setting the example for us there. Drink fluids. And next up is approval of minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes? And if so, would anyone like to move to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, and any discussion or questions about the minutes? Okay, then all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Aye. And any nays in the minutes or abstains on the minutes? Okay, so we have approved our minutes. And the moving into our discussion, I think that reflects the items we had brought up at the last meeting. The long range planning update, it looks like Kent McCrae. Jackson, do you have anything you wanted to lead in or say? Or is Kent going to take it away?
I suggest we just follow the agenda and we'll see where those discussions take us, and I'll insert myself at that time as appropriate.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
well, very good. Let me confirm you can see my screen. Am I sharing it successfully?
Yes.
Well, thank you. I'm Kent McCrae. I'm the engineering manager in the Technical Services and Engineering Group, which has large oversight and responsibility for planning capital projects and for envisioning where we need to grow. So we'll go over a few of our CIP projects and what the long range planning projects are that could be of interest to you. So recently completed this, Jaime will probably want to everybody to shake his hands. This was a big project. Phase 2 of the Old Nogales Interceptor was 7 miles of 36-inch pipe. It allows us to also pick up flows that will come into the aerospace corridor, and you're surely aware that that's where we'll pick up aerospace defense and research and business park flows. The Tucson International Airport, or the Tucson Airport Authority, has plans to expand. And there's the general aerospace defense related industries that are coming in there. Having just put this in service and having the aerospace in corridor line going is kind of interesting. We already have our first what we call a type 2 request. So we have the Verano project already looking for capacity assurance, and we can give that to them because we have this in place, and they'll sewer through that line.
Hey, Kent, but just before you change, or just to refresh everybody's memory, you know, and Jaime or you maybe can tell me for sure, but I think this has been going on for like 7 or 8 years, piece by piece, as we started this project, but it was done in 3 phases. And so Kent is talking about phase 2 is now complete, but the 3 phases, which always amazes me in wastewater, it seems like when we phase a project that you don't always go in order of 1, 2, 3, or so on and so forth. You bounce around. I don't know if you spin the wheel or how you come up with the phase structure, but nonetheless, the Old Nogales Highway project is done. Phase 2 is the last phase, the longest or most expensive phase, but as Kent said, we're ready to issue capacity. So thanks.
Good. And actually, I'm learning as I go, and I didn't realize we spun the wheel. Can I spin too?
I think Jaime makes this stuff up just to drive us crazy. Hey, let's do phase 2 last, and we'll do phase 3 first, and we'll confuse them from the get-go.
Very good, Jaime. Well, and actually, this is not a totally unrelated project then. We have a phase 1 and a phase 2 of the Continental Ranch pump station force mains. This is actually going in order, but whether phase 2 or phase 1 was upstream or downstream, that's where Jaime made a call. Anyway, this is ongoing. This will still be another 1.5 years before this parallel 24-inch series of force mains. We say 21-inch. It's a 24-inch with, it's a really thick wall, so it's effectively 21-inch on the inside, I guess. This gives us operational redundancy, allows us to take flows from the west side of I-10, flows that are conveyed to Tres Rios. I think it's going to come up in another slide that we also take flow. Yeah, here we go. We take flows from as far north as Dove Mountain. Cascada, that you maybe can read on your screen, maybe not, is a large master plan development. And these projects will gravity flow into the Continental Ranch Regional Pump Station, and then through the force mains be pumped southeast. By the way, we didn't mention, but if people have questions, you can try to get my attention or tell Jeanette to mute me and shush me, or we can hold those to the end. Upcoming projects to accommodate growth and development. We are seeing growth. We're seeing demands and people coming to regional wastewater looking for sewer service as far out as Colossal Cave Road. I'm going to bounce back and forth on this same slide. We have an opportunity right now to build some of this southeast interceptor extension in the Tech Park corridor along what they call Science Park Drive. We would be working with a not-for-profit group called the Campus Research Corporation or Tech Parks Arizona to piggyback on their plans to build a road through their development, and we'll put sewer in at the same time. We're hoping to be able to pull that off. Also of interest, you've probably seen in the recent news articles that what we're calling Marco on this exhibit is probably not the best name for the project, but H2K is another name. This area was recently, a portion of this area was recently annexed or approved to be annexed by the city of Tucson for industrial use. So this is a up and coming part of town.
Steve Foley has a question.
You know, and I not, please go ahead.
Steve, did you have a question?
No, I just lost my connection for a minute there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. But if you do have questions, please fire away. This may be one of the more interesting projects going on. Right now, Carollo is doing a study for regional wastewater. We have a lot of growth interests, a lot of potential growth in the Sahuarita area and the south of Tucson. So presently, RWRD operates a Corona de Tucson regional or wastewater reclamation facility and the Green Valley wastewater reclamation facility. Town of Sahuarita has its own plant labeled a Sahuarita, and Carollo is looking at what combinations of combining or augmenting plants make sense to us. This is a picture of where RWRD or Pima County owns property to build a regional plant, if that were to be regional wastewater's choice, and if Sahuarita were to become a partner with RWRD in doing this. The site is owned by Pima County. It's ideally situated downstream of other users, so we can easily take flows from, I don't know, easily we can take flows from the Green Valley Regional Plant or from Sahuarita's plant and Corona de Tucson. Construction on this wouldn't start right away, but it could become relevant in the next 5 to 15 years. It's just a little bit of an idea. We would want to convey flows from the Green Valley or to the regional facility. But the combination of how much we centralize has yet to be determined, what centralization really looks like for us. So in our planning horizon.
This is Anne Marie. I raised my hand. I just have a quick question.
Please.
Sorry to interrupt, Kent. So you said 5 to 15 years. 5 years isn't very far away. I mean, so what's the decision-making point on the regional facility, or I guess when's the decision-making point? If it's only 5 years, that seems to me it's got to be relatively soon, within the next few years.
I'd like to work on an answer to that, and then Jackson can fill in the gaps.
Okay.
Probably a decision needs to be made in the next year and a half. And then funding needs to be secured, and an agreement to work with or to go in a separate direction from the town of Sahuarita would probably need to be, we'd need to know what the footprint looks like for that and how much they want to participate. Some of the timing, it's going to be hard to tell you. Some of it, there's a project called CCAP, which is several sections of state land that could outfall to that plant, or it could stay fallow for 15 years. So there's some there's some guesswork involved as we get interest from developers that are making proposals to purchase state land. They'll come to us and try to secure capacity. We'll tell them what our plans are. They can tell us what their time frame is. But it's definitely something that RWRD or the Pima County has to work out with town of Sahuarita, and I'm not in a position to say where that negotiation is.
And Marie, thanks, Kent. That was fine. we did sign an MOU. I lose track of time, but I'm gonna say maybe 2 months ago, the Jan Lesher signed it and the town manager signed an MOU saying we now have 12 months to work together in good faith to make a decision of whether we're, partnering or doing something along those lines. And so, we just recently had an update on the presentation that Corolla did on our study we shared with the town. And so when Kent says 5 years, that would probably be driven by the town's need. We think the town would be pushing if potentially for that fast track as a possibility, but they did upgrade the capacity at their existing Rancho plant, which they still will be able to tie in systems to. But there are some areas of their DMA that won't be able to go to that plant, so they would need a new plant. And really, it's their crystal ball and what they tell us in this next 10 months that remain on the MOU. But if we were just doing it from our best estimate from our own planning without the town, we're probably closer to 9 years, more like,
Okay.
or 10 years, 2035 type thing. And so the 5 years is fast tracked if the town pushes us. But of course, every year your crystal ball gets a little clearer. But that's our general range that we look at. And the same thing, like when we did meet with the town here just a couple weeks ago, we showed them out, actually closing down their Rancho Sarita plant at a specific year where we would go from an 8 million, we would plan to build an 8 million gallon per day facility to start. And then when they had the timing of the shutdown of Rancho Sarita, we would add another 4 million to make it a 12 million capacity. But the town said, well, we might want to shut down Rancho Sarita earlier. And if it's, that would have to be a detail in the discussion, because if it's moved up too much, we would go right to building a 12 MGD facility right off the bat. So those are the types of discussions, and that timing is always our biggest challenge to see what growth is doing and what everybody's projections and predictions and how accurate they are. But if it was 5 years, I think that would be ambitious, but that would be the town pushing us in an agreement. And other than that, we're probably looking closer to 10 years. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Thank you, Jackson and Ken, for giving me more details on that. Mhm.
All right. So long range horizon, here are several areas that that we've been approached about sewering. It's not all going to happen at one time. I mentioned Verano recently. It's the original people who did the development agreement have sold part of that off to Sunbelt Holdings. So it's Diamond sold that to Sunbelt Holdings. So they're submitting their tentative block plat for one section. In fact, they call it Section 10. The area in purple, we just discussed that's an area that is definitely a hot area. Several have approached RWRD about purchasing that from state land and developing it industrial. The future fairgrounds is what they call the Southeast Employment and Logistics Center at the fairgrounds, is targeted for economic development by Pima County. Pima County owns property there and owns land and hopes to see that develop. And now I'd be bouncing back. If you remember, I meant to mention that Southeast Interceptor will pick up flow from the fairgrounds line. So everything should work together well. We should have quite a bit of capacity for this Southeast Employment Center. Other questions? I have a couple of more slides and I'll just throw them at you, but do you have questions to this point? So this is the planning center has developed a layout for what things might look like around the fairgrounds. People here are probably aware. I imagine this was presented either last year or maybe even the year before, that the fairgrounds had its own treatment plant, but now we sewer through this new 15-inch line that goes up to Rita Road. This is what the tech park looks like. If people like to do semantics and word games, some people call it U of A Tech Park, some call it Arizona Science and Technology. They are an not-for-profit corporation called the Campus Research Corporation, Tech Parks Arizona. And I guess I view this as similar to the Bridges Tech Park. It was a state land in town developed by the same group. Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I had. Hopefully we can again answer questions you might have now, or give you even a more thorough answer if you want to email Jackson or email Eric Wiedewold or myself.
Thank you, Ken. I have a question about the I guess the length of the pipe, or how long it would take for the flows to reach the treatment plant from out and Tech Park and or that area into, it would come to Agua Nueva, Tres Rios.
That's a good question for Jaime, I think.
Yeah, it's between 12 and 18 hours from one point to another, depending on how much flow is going on. Like at high flow, it'll go very fast. Low flow, it'll slow down. So between 12 and 18 hours from the far ends of the county to treatment facility.
Okay. And do you have any concerns about the if there is, more transitional use, like for the fairgrounds or anything like that, or is it pretty consistent flows that you would be seeing in those from that area?
It depends on what the business is. If it's industrial and they have, for example, there's a canning facility near that same area, and they have logs of processed water that they send out. But overall, it's fairly consistent, so it averages out. So we kind of know what their flows are going to be, or the flow that they will be contributing are long term, based on their processes.
I might build on that residential developments have some fairly established patterns. We call them diurnal patterns, and we also use the buzzword attenuation. So we know that what peaking times of day are. When industrial comes, we kind of have to ask them. If it's a large industrial, we don't really know. Kind of like Jaime is saying, it depends on their business model. A school might similarly, they're flushing and their cafeteria is operational for 8 or 10 hours out of the day, and then it's quiet. So all kinds of scenarios we try to take into account to make sure we size pipe correctly for the correct peaking to get the. And then you're probably also aware we size pipe to flow at 75% full on a peak dry weather day condition. So that's how we get our pipe sizes.
Also, again, just normal variables in a system as large as ours. Two good examples are where we actually notice the differences. The University of Arizona, during the summer, they have a lot of people off campus for obvious, they still have, they're functional and they have summer school, but a large population is gone. And so we see a drop in flow from that area, and the same in Green Valley during the summer months. you get a lot of the snowbirds are back where they came from. And so you can actually see pretty significant drops in some of our pipes. And all those, mixed in this dynamic system, we run a hydraulic model of our entire system to track and plan and predict flows. And when we need additional capacity, and it takes all those things into consideration. But because of the size and maturity of our system, it's hard to change significantly out of the diurnal flow patterns that Kent talked about. And, for the most part, it's pretty consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on down the agenda, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah, are there any of the other members have any questions? You're good. Okay. Yeah, so we will move on then to the CIP project update with Jaime.
So I'll be going over the prioritization of our CIP program. And I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Can you all see this document here, project matrix? Good. So this process or way to prioritize projects was put together maybe 10, 12 years ago. And it was based on giving weights to different requirements or priorities for the county or the wastewater department, and overall what would drive a project to go rank higher than another. Since we have so many requirements and so many maintenance, new construction, rehabilitation needs that we need to accomplish, we need to have some sort of guidance on how to rank and stack them to put our limited funds in the right place. So going back at this document, you'll see that there are categories, and we have, first of all, protect health, safety, and property. That's our main goal. We don't want to have something out there that's going to harm the environment or our population because we didn't do something, a repair or an augmentation, something like that. So that has a higher weight than, for example, regulatory, which is also important, but a little less. And we also have a category for rehabilitate, preserve, and enhance the assets that we already have in place. Then at a lower level, we have odors as a nuisance to the county population. We have another category that's a little lower, that's promote economic development. And the very last one is a master plan or long-range plan. And there are different examples of these categories that we can go through, and you'll see later in a spreadsheet that kind of compares and calculates all of these categories and scores to see how they play out against each other. So this first category, protect human health, safety, property through system rehabilitation and capital investment, goes from 0 to 10, and it has certain scores depending on what the need is. And it'll prevent, for example, a score of 10 prevents a potential loss of life or a likely threat of injury or health hazard where consequences of failures to act are extremely high. So that is an emergency, for example, something in a treatment plant, we have a failure on a big electric system and we need to act on it right away. That's a high score. Or we have a corroded interceptor with a big hole that may collapse and may create a sinkhole, for example. That's a high score. Where we see, for example, cracks on a pipe that are not serious, it's a very low score, and that gives you a range of scores that you can apply to it. And that score multiplied by the weight gives you a total for that category for that particular project. Other categories like regulatory and contractually driven improvements. These are, for example, ADOT projects. They're not driven by the county. It's project driven by another jurisdiction or agency, and we have to basically go along while they're there because the project is happening, and we have not a lot of control of how we can affect their schedule. So we are basically driven to contribute to a particular project to realign or adjust a line related to a roadway project usually, or another utility being installed or being worked on. The next category, the improvements which enhance system security. These are usually computer type or critical infrastructure type projects. They're either securing a facility with cameras or systems or fences or walls, or protecting a pump station location to prevent people from going in and acting on a particular system or equipment. And depending on what's the likelihood and the score, and it goes through some acronyms here like DHS and NIMS. Those are standards that we need to meet, and every project may have a score, or some may have no score because they are not impacted by security pressures. So depending on how they score on those requirements, they are assigned a score and then a weight depending on the particular project. Projects to eliminate orders or control orders are pretty easy to understand. We have areas that, because of the length of that travel time, for example, that 18-hour travel time from the east side of town to the treatment facility, sewage at some point becomes septic and odors are developed, and we have ways to control that, either by chemicals or by trying to avoid sharp turns. And maybe 30 years ago, we would do a 90-degree turn because it was convenient or efficient. Well, now we wouldn't do that because we're creating a lot of turbulence and releasing gases. So sometimes we have to go back to those old lines and either smooth them out at manholes and reaches to smooth that transition. So those type of projects are given a score on odor control if they are going to help in one way to address those problems. Next category is accommodate smart growth and economic development. For example, Kent was talking about development-driven projects in the east side of town. These are that type of projects will have a higher score on this category than others. So that tech park that UA is thinking of in the east side will have a high score on this scoring versus another project that's not related to development, and those will have low scores on those categories. The next one here is reduce long-term department cost. If there's a cost saving, something that will improve efficiency, it will have a high score on this category. For example, Anamox will save power when the project is completed because of the efficiency of that particular treatment process. You'll have a high score in the long-term department cost because it's saving energy in the long run. Versus a pipeline installation, which is not saving any cost, that will have a low score on in this category. And so those are kind of like a cheat sheet on how we kind of assess each project category and score them. And if we go to the spreadsheet like this, and it's kind of hard to see, but I'll zoom in a little bit here. So this is our current program, and it's sorted by this type of project. It's either a closeout project is an annual mandatory program that's maintaining or extending the life of our assets, future rehabilitations, where some are under construction, and so on. Well, each one of those categories has a score, and when you go and provide a score for each one of them and add them all up, it gives you a total score for the project, and it goes, and you'll see a lot of similar numbers. So all of those projects that are what we call buckets, they are annual investments on extending the life of our assets, treatment plants, manholes, pipelines, all of those projects that are extending the life of our system, they're going to have the same score because they're triggering the same category score for each one of them. So those are all of these projects that have a similar score. And then when we go to other projects, like for example, Continental Ranch Force Main, this one here, see if I can get there. Because of the particular scores on each category, when you add them all up, you'll give a score of 96 in this case. Other projects that are augmentations, I want to throw out, for example, the Old Nogales Highway that just finished would have a similar score because it's an augmentation project. It's providing the same score for developments, future development. It may not have a lot of cost savings, future cost savings for the county. So they'll score similarly, and they'll have similar scores. So in the end, you can sort them by final score, and this gives us a guidance. And of course, that's a very kind of mathematical way of going about it. And each one of those projects, like for example, Sahuarita water facility, they may have other pressures that are not accounted for here. There are political pressures. There are agreements out there that are developed and need to be making one project higher priority than another. So all of those pressures also end up affecting how they are rack and stack, and if they're done in a particular year or pushed out. But down and dirty way of giving us a sense of what projects are high priority, medium priority, and low priority is what this kind of matrix is attempting to do. Let's see, are there any questions so far on how we go about the prioritization process?
I have a question, Jaime. I think, we're looking at the projects that were all approved. The budget that we're looking at is the current approved CIP, or does this include any potential projects that would get weeded out?
No, these are all the approved.
Or when do you do that? Go ahead.
So these are all the approved projects, but this is done for the 5-year program. So every project that's in the system, if we put the 5-year program, which is a very big list, you'll see the same score and ranking on all of them. This helps us drive. For example, this one's down here. But this helps us drive or decide why we need to do Anamox now versus later, or why can we push the Sahuarita wastewater facility farther out and do other projects earlier if they pop up and they're a higher priority.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. So I'm understanding it's not like there's other projects out there that aren't on this list or anything like that.
So there are future, this is just the current year that
in the next
just started. Yes. So if we were to put all 5 years, this list probably would go down to 100+ projects.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that answers my question.
Are there any other questions? If you have any other questions later on, shoot me an email or let Jeanette know, and we can run back and provide additional information on this process.
Sorry, I do have a question. These projects go for so long, and we kind of become familiar with them, but then we forget some of the details. Like the Class A biosolids, I understand that's going to save us a lot of money in the long term if we're able to apply biosolids on the land and sell them. But I don't recall the cost benefit analysis. I'm assuming there was one done, and it must look very favorable. Is that correct?
Probably Tony can jump in there. That's one of his projects, and he has more information on it.
As far as a cost analysis for presenting the project, I wasn't involved with that part, but definitely will save the county a lot of money if nothing else, simply trucking fees and costs.
Right.
But as I get into that project, I have a little presentation on it. It'll increase the overall efficiency of the Tres Rios plant by quite a bit as well, as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great, thanks.
and Steve, one other key part of it, it has a payback. It's not great payback. Yeah, it's going to reduce the number of trucks significantly and save on our hauling and disposal costs. But also, currently we make a Class B biosolid, but that drying process will make a Class A, which opens it to additional markets, including
Right, yeah.
county parks and schools and other things that, we worry strategically that the land is getting further and further away for agricultural disposal. And so it's
Right.
hard to do a cost benefit because you'd have to estimate what the future haul distance is and, a lot of those. But it makes sense for us strategically to continue having an outlet for our biosolids. And yes, it does have a payback. And I think it was maybe 6 years, 7 years, but reasonable anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the one. I was pretty familiar with the project. Otherwise, just the payback period, I wasn't. So thanks. That helps. Thank you.
Anne Marie, you have a question?
Anne Marie? Yeah.
You're muted, Anne Marie.
Thank you. Actually, I have a couple questions. The first one is the one I always have to ask. If there's something looming in the future, in the 5-year, 10-year range that we aren't really talking about, but that you see coming up that might affect the capital improvement projects? Is there anything looming out there?
I think the one that's coming up is Kent's U of A Business Park. Or Kent, you probably had the right name for that location.
Yeah, the biggest one from our perspective, we're in this 50-ish million a year, but you'll see in the 5-year plan in that we start spending money on the Sarita Regional, and that's going to start jumping up. So that's probably the biggest one that impacts the steady state that we're at right now. And depending on how quickly, whether it's a 5-year plan, that we put money in there to start spending in like year 3 or 4 of the 5-year plan, because if it does come that fast, we at least better show it out there. But that's still a crystal ball conversation. But that's the biggest impact to the current steady state.
Did you have another question, Anne Marie?
Actually, you led right into my next question. Is that? Yeah, I don't know. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Are you guys
It's
hearing
breaking
me?
up a
Yeah,
little.
Okay. Yeah, actually, Jackson, you were breaking up on me a little bit too, but I understood your answer. So maybe it's on my point. But I noticed that we were at 54 million for those 3 years, and then you took a jump up to 87, 85 when the Sarita plant came in. But the costs for the Sarita plant right now are estimated, larger than roughly 30 million, I think. So is that going to is that plant potentially going to make us have to reduce our other capital improvement projects, or enough to handle that?
No,
facility?
I mean, we're at that kind of steady state of, on a $1.3 billion of assets, we got to continue a rehab rate of, 3 to 5%, but at least 3% on 1.3 is, $39 million. And the 54, we still do augmentation projects and other things. So we're in that range pretty much consistent, but Sarita is going to push us up to where we're spending 80, $90 million in that future time frame. And the first component is not just the plant. We'll have to build something at the plant, but we could even put a small package plant temporarily if we wanted to, but we got to get big pipelines, interceptor lines from Green Valley all the way to the new facility. And after that, we'd have to get a line from Corona de Tucson to that facility. So those are big parts of the cost, and we believe that it's going to require rate increases to cover that additional cost. That's the current discussion anyway.
So can I ask one more follow-up question? Sorry, Asia. So then, if I interpret that correctly, building that facility will have to increase rate, but we're not going to be reducing our 30 to 54 million capital improvement project budget that we need for maintenance and augmentation.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
And I heard you say, following up on what Anne-Marie was asking, Jackson, you're looking at a potential rate increase to take on that plan. Is there any other? Is there any other revenue, or is it really just sort of replacing infrastructure that's there for existing users? Would there be new connection fees or anything that would help with that, or is it?
Yeah, of course, connection fees will help. That'll be the source, but we're going to have to invest some bigger money, like in Green Valley. We've been now pushing off. All right, Green Valley, we're not, we still have lagoons at Green Valley too. Sure, it has an oxidation ditch, but ultimately we're going to have to start spending real money out there. And we think in our long range plan, it makes more sense to invest in that new strategic location with a regional facility and not put the money into Green Valley. And so it's going to slowly die a slow death. And so we'll be saving some capital investment in that area, but putting it towards this new plant. So the revenues are just the ability to continue get connection fees, but that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Steve, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, along the same line, I assume part of the negotiations with Sarita is cost sharing on the new plant, since that's going to be saving them future costs, and so that we don't know at this point, I assume.
That's great. Yeah, great question or comment, Steve. Yeah, until and if we know if Sarita is going to be involved, a portion of that construction cost they would have to bear that cost, because they would be wanting a certain amount of the capacity for construction and for the operations and maintenance as well. But then they would be entitled to that same proportion of effluent as well. So those are the discussions and conversations we're having with them right now. And either we're going to bear all that cost or they will be partners in it. But again, it's just serving a larger capacity or a service area.
Right. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, and Craig, did you have a question, or it was answered? Or?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question about if Green Valley tied in. I mean, I'm sorry, if Sarita tied in, if they're going to want their effluent, or if it was going to belong to the county. So you just answered that.
Yeah, we think that's a key reason why we're having these discussions, but I can't speak for the town or the council or the town manager, whatever their priorities and agendas are. But we believe, with any community, as we've learned over history, that, they want to have some guarantee of some water to help continue their growth and their 100-year guarantees of that liquid gold. So I'm sure that they would be interested in getting effluent, and, we may just tell them, hey, well, one option could be, in these discussions could be, well, we're just walk away from your service area, we'll serve it, and we'll give you first right of refusal in a sale of that effluent. You can still be the first one in line, so to speak. There may be other ways around it, but one way or the other, we need to get to that arrangement so we know where we're headed in the future.
And it sounds like Jackson, is that's both the study that you're doing and the MOU that you're developing with are related to that? Or
Right,
is there anything else going on? Go ahead.
The study was looking at, one of the big questions that we kind of threw at ourselves was, you know, we've always known economies of scale is a real valid financial perspective. And the regional plant makes sense, especially with having to invest in these smaller areas for growth and stuff. But new to the mix is, you know, the county is not a water provider, but having water, you know, effluent available at these strategic locations may be better than sending it all to a regional plant and cleaning it and pumping it back to provide a water, you know, like in a DPR case, for instance, direct potable reuse. So we did this, should we deconsolidate or consolidate? And basically, in a nutshell, the outcome of the study basically showed the life cycle cost of a couple of scenarios of consolidation and a couple of scenarios of deconsolidation. The life cycle costs are very similar, including the water component. So we're going to stay with our long ingrained philosophy of centralization, consolidation type thing. And that's what we're going to be pushing right now. And so that, you know, that's where we're headed, and how the town wants to participate, and if they want to participate, is the MOU piece of it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, if there are any other questions on the project, I guess we move into the project design and construction. Oh, well, yeah. Tony, your presentation on the CIP project update.
Alrighty, so product design and construction, we have 3 projects for wastewater right now, and that's the ONI, which Kent went over and it just wrapped up. So we picked up the tail end of that and got that completed. And also the force main, which he talked about, a couple updates on that is basically the phase 2 of that is complete north of Twin Peaks Road and is complete south of Cortero down to the plant. So just that middle section there left to do, and they are mobilizing in the next few days to do the boring underneath Cortero Road there. So yeah, and then the third project is the solar drying, which got brought up briefly there by Steve. Let me attempt to share here. So you see my screen there? All right. So the solar dryings project, like Steve was saying, right now Tres Rios is producing a Class B biosolid, which can be used as fertilizer. It cannot be used as fertilizer on federal land. Most of the land just north of us here is federal land that's leased by the farmers. So got to get a little bit closer to Casa Grande to get to private farmland, and the trucking expense goes up significantly there. They're currently taking about 10 truckloads out a day, and there's not a whole lot of storage available, so those trucks have to keep going constantly. They can't stop. When it's not being taken up to farmland up there, a lot of it is getting taken over to landfill and getting dumped and buried. So the solar dryer will take it from the sludge that's coming out of the process, instead of going through centrifuges to get it down to 80% liquid, 20% solid. It'll be going through screw presses, which should be a lot less maintenance than the existing centrifuges. and that'll take it down to the 20% solid, where it'll be introduced to the greenhouses. You can see an example of just some greenhouses, and it'll have rakes that moves the material from one end to the other as it gets dried as it goes along. Kiewit won the bid and the proposal for, well, not the bid, but the proposal for the project. It's a design build project, so they're taking it all the way from conception through completion. All right. So brief overview of Tres Rios plant site, and I'm not sure why this polygon here reversed on me when it went from a PDF to PowerPoint, but I tried to fix it several times and it just decided I want to be that way. So the red areas you see are the usable landfill areas. Wastewater supplied a substantial amount of money to the closure of the Ina Road landfill right there recently, to ensure that they would have first dibs on some of that land use. And so we're going to put that into play here. The bladder site is the blue area up top, where one of the proposed locations for greenhouses are going. And then another portion of the project is to connect waste heat coming off the blower buildings of both trains at Tres Rios. So since that's kind of unrelated to the solar drying, but part of this project, I'll start there. It'll be the first part of it that gets constructed due to fewer unknowns and less design work that's needed on it. So there will be a header going between the two blower buildings to connect the two, and that does really three main things for the plant. One, instead of having just the 4 blowers on each plant, there's 2 different sizes of blowers, 4 of them on each side. So there's really 8 configurations that they can put those blowers in to get 8 different speeds coming out of the buildings. You connect the 2 and now you've got 8 blowers with the 4 different sizes, and I forget exactly how many different configurations you can put that in, but basically you can fine tune what you're needing to use, and you're not using up so many watts of electricity extra just because that's the closest setting that you can that's above where you actually need to be blowing. The second thing that's going to happen there is there's going to be a heat exchanger put in, so that those blowers that are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we can get some of that heat captured back off of that and put that into the hot water loop there on site. So that is going to have a decent reduction in natural gas used to fire the boilers that are running to keep the hot water loop going. Initially, and you'll see it in a couple of the other slides, they were looking at repurposing an old tank that was between the 2 buildings. Found that the condition of it isn't ideal. We are still looking at potentially reusing one of the clarifiers that is going to be freed up here in the near future as an additional hot water storage. But we'll see if that works out from an engineering perspective. All right. So right now, Kiewit started out with 2 basic options of where to put greenhouses. The first option is to put the greenhouses in the bladder area. So you have limited space there, which means that you wouldn't have enough time, or with the amount of waste that's being produced and needs to be processed, you don't have enough area to be able to take it all the way from Class B to Class A by passive solar alone. So there will need to be some extra energy added into that, most likely through the use of a heated floor. Whether that heated floor is electrically heated or water heated, we will find out as Kiewit does their pre-design research. Like I said, there's going to be screw presses feeding the greenhouses instead of the existing centrifuges. And then the landfill area would be used for solar collection, and whether that's concentrated solar to heat water and add that into the plant hot water system and use the hot water to heat the floors, or if that area is used for photovoltaics, and we're producing a lot of electricity to then use electricity to heat the floors and run the whole process. Or it could potentially be a mixture of the two. The next option B, right. Can you see the greenhouses over there on the landfill area, or no? Did something funny. So the greenhouses would go on the landfill area, where there's plenty of space. There'd be a little bit of either photovoltaics or concentrated solar arrays there. Not nearly as much, because you wouldn't necessarily need to have the additional heat and energy input to dry the material out. Since you have the space in the room to have nice long greenhouses to where it go all the way from a class B to a class A solely using passive solar. Still have the option of adding some hot water into the hot water system, and again, solar to make sure everything's running there. Disadvantage to this is you've got material now that we have to convey back and forth from the existing Tres Rios site over to the landfill area, and vice versa for trucking out or adding a trucking route up into the landfill area that isn't currently within the Tres Rios area. Another downfall is it being an old landfill. There's good chance of some settling happening, especially in certain areas that at one point in the 60s, 70s were used for household trash. And it's a closed landfill, so the cap that's put on there, it would take some convincing of Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to disturb that cap, because then you're reopening the landfill. So you'd be looking at some pretty hefty footers up there to make sure your landfill doesn't crack and bend, and then your turning machines moving the material from one end to the other then don't have a nice flat surface to be running on, having issues there. So they are currently, like I said, in the preliminary design. We have several vendors that have pilot screw presses coming in. So we're testing out several different types of designs of screw presses right now, and really figuring out what our main equipment is going to be. We're getting into the schedule here was impacted with lawyers and just getting a first contract agreed upon by both parties. So instead of getting that started in January like this shows, it actually got started in late May. So got about five-month lag on this schedule just from the start. But we should be looking at, so that means we should be looking at project wrapping up right around May of 2025. I think that's about all I have on it. Does anybody have any questions there?
I have a question. It sounds like you're leaning towards the idea of having like a solar collection field and then keeping the biosolids closer to where they currently are.
Yes.
Is that right, or is that decided, or you're still?
It's not decided yet, so both options are still open.
Fill in the suffice.
We will be getting to the point where we have enough info to make the proper decision on that here in the next month or two.
Okay, so that's part of the milestones, or then you'll move forward on the designs.
Yes. Then they'll be able to get us their first GMP for a specific scope of work.
Okay, any questions from the rest
Yes,
of the subcommittee? Anne-Marie,
You're muted.
you're mute.
Boy, I keep pressing the wrong buttons. Yeah, I was trying to read that table. That's if you saw me, I was like up here on my screen. So I might have missed some of what you said, but you said the decision hasn't been made yet and will be made in like the next couple of months about which route you're going to. And to me, it's kind of a significant decision, because if I looked at the presentation correctly, in one case you're making Class A, and in the other case you'd be making Class B, and you'd continue using, what was it? But that's kind of the big decision, and one of them where you would be on top of the landfill, and it sounded like you were potentially going to break through the cap. Was I understanding that correctly? A closed landfill for that
No.
construction? So I guess, did I understand it correctly? And what information do you need yet to make that decision?
So both scenarios are producing Class A. One of them, we have a limited footprint for the greenhouses, so we would have to have additional energy going into the material to get it to Class A in that small footprint. And no, we would not be breaking the cap of the landfill. That's one of the downsides of putting the greenhouses over there, is because then we have that much more engineering and more construction go into basically a giant floating slab that won't break and can work properly as a drying greenhouse.
Okay.
So really they're evaluating those two to see which is the most cost effective and which is the better option for general maintenance operations, the flow of everything there.
Okay, so those are the factors they're looking at then. So then for the old landfill, your concern is kind of, because you've got the cap. I assume was it a clay compacted cap on that old landfill? I don't remember the details.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
dirt that has specific properties to be water.
Okay. So you're concerned about if you're about the weight of the equipment. I assume there's not going to be much, there wouldn't be any infiltration because you're not having any release of liquid or anything from there. So are you then just looking at the weight of the facility on that cap?
Not so much concerned about the weight on the cap, just how much concrete we would have to put up there because it's landfill. There's certain points that will move over the course of the trash degrading. Not a whole lot on this landfill because most of it was used for construction trash. So there's a lot of steel and concrete and that sort of stuff. There was a small portion of it that was used for household trash a long time ago. So not going to see a whole lot of movement, but there could potentially be some movement.
Okay, no, that makes sense. It's been a long time since I've looked at those closed landfills, so I don't remember the details. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Thanks. I have one more, I guess, that I'm just not that familiar with. Is this a fair? Is it common? All of the technologies that you're using, just sort of customizing it, or is this very different from?
So yes
typical?
and no. There's
Okay.
there's a lot of treatment plants that use solar greenhouses to create Class A biosolids. There are very few that have additional heating in the floors. And there's several different ways that different places have done it. Some work better than others. And so part of this project is going to be doing a little bit of groundbreaking type of work as far as that's concerned. It'll definitely be the largest greenhouse to make Class A biosolids using heated floors if we do go that route on the bladder side.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a great direction, good project to go for the A+. I don't know what the other committee, right?
I'm definitely excited about it. And like Steve brought up, or Jackson, or both of them brought up a little while ago, it's not part of this project to make a sellable fertilizer, but they can, once we get to this point, do some market research to where you could potentially end up with bags of fertilizer that are coming from this plant that are little pellets to put on your lawn or sell to country clubs and golf courses or farms that are around as well. So it is very cool and will definitely significantly reduce the carbon footprint of Tres Rios.
Okay, then any other questions for Tony? Good. Okay, all right. Thank you, Tony.
All right. Thank you.
And yeah, and also Jaime and Kent for your presentations as well. I think that they were really helpful for what we asked for in terms of the planning and the update. Yeah, I think we have some applause there. Thanks, everyone, Steve and all. Was there anything else on the subcommittee? It sounds like our questions are answered on these presentations. Is there anything else you think we need to be looking at or want to ask for any clarifications in the future? I know Jaime offered to send us other information if we need it. Seems like we're all pretty satisfied with.
Steve, you have your hand up?
Oh
yeah. I find our meetings are so infrequent that it does take a while to get back up to speed on some of these projects, and in the 6 to 12 months between meetings, a lot of these projects make large progress towards their goals or get started or get finished. So I'm wondering if it might be helpful to have intermediate meetings where we're more updated on the projects and not trying to look at the whole prioritization and the whole project list, but just a little more detail on where we are with the individual projects that are under construction.
That's a good question. Yeah,
more,
I don't think
more meetings. Well, I don't know if that's going to fly with anybody or not, but it's a thought that I had.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Maybe, I don't know what other folks' thoughts are. Maybe there's a report or something that I imagine that staff probably generate something already, like closeouts or something like that, that could be shared.
Yeah, with like a quarterly or report, like something along those lines with balances of like what we have spent so far during the year versus what the original budget is. We do those reports frequently to track our program. We can share those, and that's kind of a snapshot of where we are with each project.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think, okay, great. That'd be great if you could do that. And then Steve, we do have the monthly meetings, right, of the fall. So if there were any questions, you know, from those reports, you could send them in and get answers probably. Is everybody, that's a good solution?
Jaime, you might also, besides that update report that they're indicating, I think it would be good maybe to send them 1 or 2 KPI slides that we look at, and one being the spend rate, because the way county finances work, you know, your first month of July, the new fiscal year is very low, and the last few months of the year are really high. It's almost identical every year, the spend rates on projects, and show that one. And then also, you know, for the past several years, you could show that we've been spending 95, 97, 98% of our CIP budget every year, to show that we're right on our mark. You know, we always want to be above 95%, and typically we're even 97 or 98%. So if you know, we already have those, we look at those, Jaime, you might add that to the list of what you send them also.
Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
And just so you know, I'm just saying this ahead of time before Jaime ships that one to you. You know, as we go through every month, we talk about many things in our business, but especially CIP, and things come up that change the course of a projected project. You know, and I don't need to get into any detail, but just the life of any project takes ups and downs, goods and bads. But we have, through our discussion and coordination, we have the ability to shift. Okay, if we're not going to spend 8 million on this project, it's now going to be 6 million. Well, that 2 million, we can pick it up in some of our other areas, or vice versa. And so we still try to spend our targeted amount to keep our spend rate consistent with the need, and not just say, well, we're 2 million behind on this project, so we're going to be 2 million short. We know we're going to have to catch up eventually, so we want to keep the spend rate consistent so we don't have peaks and valleys. We're staying up with our overall need for rehabilitation and all those things that we primarily focus on in our effort. So just to FYI, but we can talk about that at a future date when you see that KPI slide.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Then that sounds good to me. I don't know if any is our meeting scheduled then in 6 months. Is that sound good to everybody? We'll stick to the 6 months. We've just got these reports interim that we'll receive. Okay, great. Steve's good with that. Everybody's good with that. Then typically we would meet again like January timeframe. I think sometime we may have met in February, depending on like if there was something that was going on that needed to kind of wrap up before the presentation of the committee. But and we usually schedule it as we get closer, since people have be doing their plans. So if that sounds good to everyone, I'll just say we'll target, you know, the 2nd or 3rd week of January. Does that sound good, or any other suggestions? And then as we get closer, really kind of lock in the date and stick with our 6 months. That the next meeting we'll get the type of information, right, where we're typically making some kind of recommendation to the full committee to recommend that the board approve, or whoever it is. I think it's the board. Jackson, help me out. Is that right? The full committee votes to send a recommendation to the board, and they rely on us to give that.
Yep.
So that'll be our main task for next time. You know, looking at the current status, and I don't know that there's anything else, unless it would be specific projects that we might want an update on. But I think those are the main things. You know, we've talked about the prioritization now and that, but I'm wondering if the committee has anything else that you'd like for that next meeting.
Well, I can
Anne-Marie.
Yeah. So that next meeting is usually pretty full because we go through the projects in pretty detail and because we want to understand them so we can make an educated recommendation to the full committee. So I don't think we'd have time, but that's in 6 months. And I don't know, we were talking about the possibility of the MOU with Sarita and maybe fast tracking that plant. So I hate to set agenda items for a year, but in a sense, that's something, I assume Jackson, in a year, we'd probably have a pretty good update on that. Or if there's some movement, maybe a brief update at our January meeting. It's just we don't have a lot of time at that January meeting because we want to spend it looking at the project so we can make a good recommendation. So I'm kind of throwing that out, maybe a brief update in January, but a year from now, maybe there's going to be some clear direction on where you're going to go with that regional facility. And then, since you just brought up brief little updates, I would be interested when the decision's made in about a month, just to get a little update. I don't know if you're going to do a handout or something about which direction you're going with the biosolids, just for my own interest or the committee's interest that you've now decided to go this route and you're going to use the excess heat for the floor or just a little update when we get our little synopsis of the projects, if we're able to do that.
Yep, definitely.
Sounds good. Similarly, I'm assuming if there is an actual MOU signed with Sarita, then we would hear about it at the next meeting of the whole committee.
Yeah, and that's, I think, what was stated. I will definitely, as those updates are available, if they're done and available and meaningful, we'll include that on our agenda for your next get together, or at whatever time it is available. We'll bring it up to you.
Okay, well, that sounds good. And I think we kind of covered the future agenda items there. And there is a final call to the audience, which we don't have. So hearing no one from the, I guess any of us could be the audience as well. Was there anything else from the subcommittee or from the staff? Okay, all right, then motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, and
Bye.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sounds good. All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Yep, bye-bye.
Sure.